Hello and welcome to Procrastination Station. Procrastination as in procrastinating and that other thing that we all do. If you can put it together, then you're my people, and if you can't, perhaps click that next button. No shade. I'm your host, Hannah, and I'm here to talk about self-sabotage in a way that invites all parts of us to come along for the journey. I'm here to lay out the setbacks and superpowers of self-sabotage in order to manage our limitations. Throughout the show, we'll discuss designing a life that works in your favor through sustainable creative practices. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoyed today's topic. Hi and welcome. I have something so special today. So I have a new friend called Shon here with me. We are going to be talking about imposter syndrome. He also has a business and a podcast. So I'm super excited to pick his brain about podcasting things and how imposter syndrome comes into play with entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's topic, and let's get right into it. So tell me about the safe room. Oops, I forgot to say introduce yourself.
So the safe room, first of all, let me just kind of introduce myself just to the people out there. So my name is Shon Williams. I also go by the president if you want to call me by that. That's my little nickname. I am the host of the Safe Room podcast. It's a safe space for entrepreneurs, small businesses, industry leaders, local artists, and basically anyone who has a voice and has a story to share. I want to provide that space to them where they're able to amplify their experience, but also hope that the conversations are very educational. I really care about podcasting a lot. I started back in May 2020, and this is something I've been doing just 24/7 every single day. Again, the safe room, if you want to go check me out, Apple, Spotify, you can check out the episodes. And yeah, sorry, Hannah, I had to do like a quick little plug,
Yeah,
just
no, please do. It's all good. It's all good. This is what this space is here for as well. I really like to uplift the voices of entrepreneurs as well. Now, I know you particularly like to work with Black entrepreneurs and artists and things like that. I would really love to know how it provides a safe space to uplift Black creatives and entrepreneur voices.
the whole origin of the safe room at the beginning actually was very different compared to what it's now. When I first got started, I'm not gonna joke with you. It was the beginning of the pandemic, like I mentioned, May. I was just bored online, binge watching YouTube videos. I'm just like, yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and just kind of waste my time. I want to start a podcast, and there's a story to that too. Because 2 years prior, I did have some podcasting experience during my days at York University. I was part of a club called Negative Balance. It was basically business related topics that we had on the podcast. They allowed me to do like hosting, and I never done like podcast hosting before, so I didn't know what to expect. And I had a blast. It was such a fun time. And then 2 years later, 2020, I thought, you know what, maybe I'll bring that back just to see. Now, originally, I was mostly covering like the COVID cases, what was going on, just trying to be the good human being. Like, oh, these are like the updates. This is what's going on. Hope you enjoy the episode. But I didn't really have like topics in my bag like that. Then I decided, you know what? Maybe I should just like bring people on and just like give them a platform to just speak on something. So then I just started going to my contacts. And when I say contacts, I'm talking about like my Instagram page, because like that's literally my definition of contacts. And I thought, hey, like, do you want to come on the podcast? Do you want to reach out? Hey, let's have a conversation. And, it just started to build and build and build. I remember taking a break at one point because, I had like school, I was working, so it was just very busy. And when I came back, I thought, I really want to stick to this whole, structure of bringing on Black entrepreneurs, Black businesses, especially as a Black male. I know how important it is for Black voices to be amplified on a higher echelon. I understand that sometimes we don't get that space or that inclusivity to really speak about our true stories or talk about the things that we do good. Every time we have such a high win, it's always undermined by the losses, or better yet, like we never take the chance to boast ourselves up. That's something I'm learning even as I go. Just recently I'm learning to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm doing this. I'm going in these places. I'm doing all these amazing stuff. 2 years ago, I would have been like, I mean, yeah, I have a podcast. It's cool. Like you can hear the tone of my voice. It would just be very just nonchalant. Really, the whole point of the safe room is to provide that space for Black people that allow them to, again, share on their experiences. I met lots of people through networking events. I met lots of people just through the pandemic as well, online, other podcasters that I listen to as of today. And I want to give them that type of, love and appreciation. And trust me, guys, this is not something that's like, oh, it's for the show or it's their character. I truly love having conversation with people and showing love to them, because I understand like we're all trying to get to the same place. Why are we
Oh,
trying
we
to
are.
fight our way to like, oh, it's got to be me over this person? It's got to be be, I gotta be at the top, they're at the bottom. It's like, come on now. Like we can all make it where we need to be. So like why can we
Yeah.
not provide a safe space where we can all be winners together? Hence the safe room.
Yeah, I feel that our world is really transitioning from a place of high competition to more co-creation or collaboration. And I really admire developing a space that's specifically for Black people because I feel like the struggle is real. And also to be able to connect together and share in the same mental health stories and the same experiences in professional life and finding jobs and all of the things. I feel like that's very, very special. On a side note, sometimes imposter syndrome refers to the feeling something is wrong with your circumstance, sometimes paired with the tricky feelings of being in the wrong container and wanting to show gratitude for the container you're in, but also wanting something new. Imposter syndrome never goes away, but it gets better when you give yourself permission to be a beginner and make changes as it comes. Back to the episode. I want to know, what is it about the safe room? How do you create a safe room with the Safe Room podcast? I'm sure you even mentioned yourself, it's not just for show. What extra steps do you take to make sure that it's a safe space for people that come on?
Yeah, so usually my approach to it again is I try to make the conversations very open-ended. I don't really focus that much on terms of the structure. The conversation needs to be so like formidable. It can't be just like ask question, answer question,
I
ask
hate that.
question again, answer question, maybe a little compliment. And ask question. I no, like it's too formulaic, and I can't be here for that.
It
Plus,
is
I'm
boring.
someone who has like a very like bubbly personality, which was never the case. When I was young, I had a hard time really showing that. You know,
Yeah.
it was like very, it was expressed in different ways that honestly, like even today, I it mind boggles me. Like I don't know how I did this when I was young, and like for some reason, that was my best way of showing my charisma. I wanted to create something where it's more conversational, as if like we're having a conversation, as if like we're not even recording. Like there's
Yeah,
no
like, we're
camera.
just sitting on the couch chatting as friends, and this is because those are always the best conversations. Those are always when you learn
Exactly.
the most about life, about yourself, about the way that it is. Excuse me.
Exactly. Exactly.
I love
Yeah,
that
for
so
sure.
much. I also really feel like with the safe room in particular, to be able to allow people to be 100% vulnerably, authentically themselves, it really allows, specifically for the Black community, to be able to vulnerably share in their vulnerabilities. That sounds obvious, but as you were saying, that a lot of the time in the Black community, if you have flaws or if you came from the hood or if you any of these things, it can sometimes be equally shone light on to your achievements. And that should not be the case. We all have ups, we all have downs, and having a space where we can share in all of it equally and not put too much weight on the negatives, not put too much weight on the positives, even to just be like, yo, we are full, well rounded human beings who are just trying to walk ourselves home is, I feel like, really, really great. I feel like our world really needs more spaces like that that are very niche to particular communities. And it's very fabulous.
I definitely focus like mostly on like bringing people who are like doing amazing things right now. In terms of like the topics of just like things that happen within the community, like those are things I hear every single day. I don't really focus too much on the negative, which is where like, oh, what's the stereotypical assumptions that are placed on marginalized communities, like, you know, Jane and Finch or Rexdale. I don't really focus that much on that. I focus more on like what's the good things that are happening, because those are the stuff that aren't really being talked about enough or
I
being
agree.
put on a higher platform. Like there's so much like talented people that I know in my area alone. Like, and I know this because I've seen it. I've worked with people in the area, and I focus more on that. Not to say that I want to bypass just all the negatives, because you know there are times we need to again be open and talk about these topics. You know, with different people or people like us who allow to share and like, okay, this is what I'm thinking, like what are you thinking about this? You always want
Mhm.
to hear that open feedback, but I think at the same time, again, we don't get the chance to share about, hey, like I got the chance to collaborate with this business or this organization, or hey, I'm selling my products at this pop-up store, or better yet, I'm covering this event. You know, my business is thriving, it's blooming. We
Mhm.
don't get to open up on stuff like that. Like my guests, they really appreciate how I like to, you know, give them a stage to really talk about themselves. Because again, one of the few issues that a lot of people that I've connected with is that they don't get the chance to just share what they do. Yes, you're probably a entrepreneur and you tell people what you do, but it's more in like pitch form. Like, oh,
Yeah.
my name is this. I have a business. My business is about that. But they don't really get into the meat and potatoes of how it got started. What were some of the trials and tribulations you had to go through? And what are some things that you're looking to build upon with your business? Those are like the littlest things that I try to tap in with each conversation. And I think it brings out a lot. I recently had an episode that dropped last week. I had someone who's like a financial professional. I'm telling you, Hannah, the words she had for me at the end were so touching. I was
I
really blown
heard it.
away. Yeah, I was like,
It's so great. I actually heard the tone in your voice. You're like, I'm floored.
no, I was completely stunned because it's not like to say that again, I can't embrace like appreciation because I've had lots of guests that say like, "Oh, thank you for like bringing me on." Like I've had that, but I think when she went into detail about just you're really creating a space, and then she went to say like, "Hey, shout out to like the past episodes." I'm like, "Yeah, no one's ever done that." It's not even like, "Oh, thank you for having me on this episode." No, thank you for the past episodes and the
Yeah.
upcoming episodes you're gonna have. It's like,
Thank you for this whole project, not necessarily just for the space that you hosted for me. I
yeah.
love that. That's really, really great. Now, I'm curious, what's your safe room?
Okay, so you're about to flip the question on me. So I
I
usually
am.
ask this question, they're gonna flip. Okay, this is it's cool. My safe room, it's pretty literal. It's my actual room. I feel I'm most myself, like authentically in here, where I'm able to just be the goofy character, but also be very focused with my work and everything like that. I'm mostly in my room like every single day doing work, take like my little naps and stuff just to rejuvenate and everything. But my room is definitely somewhere I've been able to grow in my passion and also in my entrepreneurship. It's kind of been my full out chamber where I've kind of reinvented everything to feel a certain way. I'm able to just kind of operate on a different level, which is good because for a long time it was kind of I was maybe working in different places, but I didn't have that one spot where everything sort of clicked. Or if I had a problem, I could just go there and then like, okay, let me just read things through, evaluate, make sure everything is great, everything is or needs improvement, whatever the case may be. And my room is definitely that where I'm able to just kind of thrive and grow in my own potential.
Yeah, yeah. The bedroom is the best place. That's where you're safe to be vulnerable, where you're safe to be every part of yourself. I love that so much. My safe room, I've got two. One of them would be out in nature. I have this picture in my mind, and I can even transport there without having to physically be there. Just picturing being in a field of flowers, surrounded by trees, the birds are chirping, very picturesque nature. I find that being in nature really makes me feel just connected to the organic matter that is being a human. We are meant to age, we're meant to grow, we're meant to eventually die, we're meant to be born. Like, we get the whole rainbow of emotions while we're experiencing this life. Being in nature allows me to remember that we are organic. We are not technology, we're not AI people. We have to take time to really be with the planet. And then my other safe room, when I really just need to connect with only myself, would be probably the shower. That's where I get all of my ideas. That's where I talk to God. That's where I do all of the things that just make me feel human. I feel like it's important to have a safe room. It's important to have somewhere in your mind or in reality where you can go to be safe. I think that what you're doing with your podcast is really special because it makes people think about that. I didn't necessarily consider where do I go when I want to feel safe until listening to your show. So I do really, really admire what you're doing. To move us on to more of the meat of the episode to talk about imposter syndrome, I would love to switch gears. Continuing on with podcasting, how does imposter syndrome show up during the podcasting journey?
For me, I would probably say with podcasting, it's something that's become like a growing phenomenon. I would probably say around like maybe 2018, podcasting has had such a surge in terms of people who consume it or people who want to actually get into podcasts. I hear it all the time, even with people I've connected. I've always wanted to start a podcast, but like, where do I start? Like, how do I begin and everything like that?
Personal
And
shameless plug, I have a how to start a podcast tutorial on my YouTube and my podcast actually. Go check it out if you want to start your own podcast because there's a lot of moving parts. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you. Continue.
no, no, it's cool. And like you even mentioned tutorial. I'm working on like a little service my own that's helping people how to like start a podcast. So like it would be like an 8-week program where it's like one-on-one consultations,
Love
basically
that.
going over different stuff like that. So it's something I'm working on at the same time. So I totally get it.
On a side note, this just goes to show you how there's so many different options within e-learning. Like Shon is talking about his course that he's creating. It's 8 weeks long. I have a tutorial on my podcast that's probably around 8 episodes long. So if you want to start a podcast and you look inside yourself, you can ask how much you need to invest, how much time you need to invest in learning this craft. This is where Shon and I are the same but different. I run my podcast for absolutely free. My tutorial on YouTube is on how to do it for free. I respect Shon for how much he knows about audio engineering, and it goes to show you can learn anything on the internet at any level for any price. Shon's course is 8 weeks with premium coaching for a price, and you'll get premium knowledge and a lot more tailored to you information. Mine is free, and I run my podcast with minimal equipment. It will give you a minimal equipment, free amount of knowledge. You can do both. That's also an option. With enough information, that's useful for someone who wants to start and they don't want to stress about all of the added equipment. If you want to turn your podcast into a business, however, or create a significant revenue stream for your business, talking to someone like Shon is going to be right up your alley because he's going to show you how to do it professionally the way that he does. Anyway, this has been a tangent. Back to the episode.
Going back to podcasting imposter syndrome, I feel with a lot of people who don't realize what podcasting, again, the work and the amount of load it has to it, it's really not even like the speaking. Because I feel like, yes, sometimes you can say it's the conversation itself. Like, I'm afraid to go in front of a camera and speak. Well, I would probably provide like a different notion. I would probably say it's the level of commitment. I definitely feel when people start off something with podcasting and then it just goes off the rails, they start to feel a little bit guilty for themselves. It's all like, I'm not sure if like this was a good idea, or like maybe even they get to into podcasting for the first time, they're just kind of stuck and they don't want to move forward. I think there's like a quick statistic that about like 98 or 99% of podcasters don't even get past like 20 episodes.
Yeah.
And if people think that's a ridiculous thing, it's very true. If we're talking anything that's completely objective or close to objective, that's probably the case because again, it's easy to go in front of a mic and speak, whether it's public speaking. That's another aspect of podcasting that takes from. It's really all the curation before and then the post-production after, and then
Yeah.
keeping that level of just engagement online as well. So like for me, I do all the recording, editing, posting. That's all me. And like
Me
I'm
too.
I'm not gonna lie, like I'm not perfect. I'll be very honest with you right now. I am so behind on content right now. I have so much
Me
things that
too. Social media content. Oh my gosh. I've actually been on a hiatus with my own podcast for a couple of months. And originally I had this like perfect plan where I was like, I'm going to tell people I'm going on a hiatus. I'm going to come back with season 2. I'm going to come back more organized and it's all going to click and work together. And it's just going to be great. But the reality was I didn't have a lot of time to make a I'm going on hiatus post. And then I also was double guessing myself because I hate when people are like, oh, by the way, I'm taking a social media break. Like, I don't really feel you have to announce these things, but it's a little bit different when you're a business owner because you want to engage your community and you want to keep them, in your circle. And it can be really scary. And this is a bit of a intrusive thought or an imposter syndrome thought where if I take a break, people are just going to forget I exist. And
yeah.
that's not true, but you're definitely right that people get intimidated by the initial idea of recording themselves on a weekly basis. But it really, once you get over like the shyness of being on camera, that's really the easiest part. In my tutorial, we talk about recording for like half of one episode because it really doesn't take that much knowledge or technical skill. What does take the knowledge and skill is setting up your topics, your scripts, if you have them. How are you going to script? How are you going to interview people if that's your strategy? What is your strategy? And then after
Yeah.
figuring all of that out, it's the editing, it's creating your captions, your cover photos, like all of these things take time. I imagine that everybody has lots to say. And when it comes to podcasting, it's nice to have a theme that goes throughout your whole show to keep it connected for your listeners. But I feel like people have lots to say and they don't necessarily look too far in the future on how much they can actually say about this topic. I've heard before people say, like, if you want to start a podcast, you need to have at least 25 ideas of episodes, not necessarily already recorded, but ideas. What can I talk about endlessly before you even start? Because, like, at least for me, I will say my podcast has grown and evolved with me so much, but it hasn't necessarily grown in terms of my subject matter. I've kept my subject matter relatively the same, beyond, like, I've noticed as I get more experienced, I'm more comfortable saying things that I would otherwise consider, like, somewhat controversial. Before I was
Yeah.
too scared, but now it's like I'm getting more comfortable with it. I think you've actually been doing it a lot longer than me. You definitely have more episodes than I do, but I also really love the evolution that you've gone through with your show, to start off, like, during COVID, like, "Oh, I just wanna start something," and then allowing it to evolve with you as you grow, and then finding this thing called the safe room to be able to connect with people who are like you. That's just so perfect, because I feel like some people, they may jump into podcasting or entrepreneurship or really anything, and then it doesn't exactly feel right.
Well,
So
okay, well,
instead of saying, "How can we
just
evolve this?" On a side note, I just want to chime in and continue my point before I let Sean say what he says. He does have some really great points, as this is his firsthand experience, but I just wanted to say that if this is you, somebody who starts podcasting or literally any creative endeavor without a proper plan, that's okay. You're allowed to start things on a little bit of an impulsive whim. That's totally fine. However, when you're starting this thing, at first it feels great. You're like, yes, I'm so in on this. And then eventually you get to your 20 episode benchmark. This could also mean 3 months in business, and something just truly does not feel right. It can be many people's story, that 98% of people who give up on writing their show, their story is that something doesn't feel right, so I'm just gonna give up because I don't actually know how to make it feel right again. This is me really just giving you full permission to change your system to work however it works for you. Maybe you can switch to making less frequent episodes. Maybe bi-weekly is reasonable. Maybe you can look at your subject matter, because you're not necessarily speaking about things that really ring true to your heart. There's different things that you can look at, that you can try way long before you actually give up. And I'm past the 20 episode mark. Yay me. And this has been my strategy. Every single episode, how can I come back and do something just a little bit differently than I did last time? I keep the same subject matter because I like my subject matter. Maybe you don't. You can change that too. This also relates back to entrepreneurship. Maybe you're working your business and you don't 100% like your customer. That's fine. How can you change your product so that it serves a different type of customer? Maybe you don't like your product. What can we change about your product that we actually like what we're selling? This, honestly, this relates to like a passion-based project, a passion-based business. If you're running a business on logic, a business that comes from earthly ideas, then yeah, you can have detachment from what you're doing, and this can be just a job, and this can be, a means of making income, and it doesn't have to go deeper. But when you're a podcaster, it honestly does have to go deeper. Sometimes if you're going to sit here and talk for a long time, it's not necessarily that you have to be deep in your episodes, but it has to provide value for the people who are listening. And I can also imagine if it's not providing value for yourself, it's not providing value for others. This is my permission to follow Sean's example of not giving up, allowing it to change however it needs to throughout your experience of doing this thing, whatever the thing is for you. Back to what Sean was saying.
yeah, just to jump in a little
Yeah.
bit, that was actually the case with me. That was the whole point. I basically jumped in. I really didn't do any research or development but ahead of time. I really just said, "Let me buy a mic and like
See
just
where it
start
goes.
recording." No, because like even like through time, like you mentioned, like to go back to the whole commitment thing, it's more than just like again, just speaking. It goes back to like you mentioned before, how we're so worried about how other people are going to think or if we take a break and everything like that. That was the same case with me. Like when I was on break, I was a little scared that are people going to forget about me? Are people going to just forget about the safe room, just the stuff that I do? And again, it consumes you because now you start to have that little panic attack inside where I need to come back probably earlier because you have that fear that people are going to step away from your content and what you're doing. But again, I feel like what's important is that you maintain strong mental health, of course, but
Of course.
also happiness in what you're doing. So again, like you mentioned how with your conversations, Hannah, it was I'm sticking to one topic. There's such thing as niche podcasts. It's
Mhm.
basically in the sense where your audience or whatever your theme is, it's specific to a group of individuals and how it represents. I would consider myself a niche podcast. I mean, I try to mix up like different things. So sometimes like I'll talk about sports. Like I love talking about sports with my best friends. So we'll have like special wild card, special episodes like that. But it's still very niche to the point where you know what you're going to get. It's going to be open ended plus educational conversations with Black individuals who have done it and have seen the success and are willing to share their stories and experience on the platform that I have, which is the safe room. So again, there are times that you have to analyze and figure out where you're going. Like you mentioned, sometimes people are pressured to release every week. You don't need to release every week. You can determine your schedule how you want it to be. If it's bi-weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, every 2 months. Heck, some people started podcasts because they have to like get a project done. And maybe podcasting is the best way to really amplify or utilize that project in its most effective way. I've seen people do like little 10 episode series and like that's it. Like they're done, which is fine. Again, podcasting's become so like flexible and versatile now. I think the real question is not about, oh, how do I get into the world of tools? But I think it's more how do you maintain a level of consistency, but also like happiness when doing podcasting? Because I've met lots of people who have started podcasting. And about 2 months later, I don't hear from them again. And I try
Mhm.
to check in and be like, hey, like, I saw you doing the podcast and what's up? It's just like, bro, it's too much work. It's too
Yeah.
much work. I can't do it. It's just like, okay, so like I started asking the question, was it too much work because like you just couldn't manage the load and you thought like you had the time, or was it that you just felt, oh, if I don't continue this type of momentum, then I'm just kind of worried about what's going to happen next. And it was for them, it was the latter. And Hannah, if it's cool, I like to share a quick story too. When I
Yeah,
got,
please do.
yeah, like when I got started, my whole aura was not about again getting views and everything like that. But that was I could probably say that now because it's easy. But back then, I won't lie, I was a little conscious about like I hope people are liking this stuff. So I had a YouTube channel at the time, and it's still going today. I'm looking to kind of revamp it and start releasing more like video episodes because people have been clamoring at me like, "Where's the video episode? Where are the video episodes?" And I tell them I was doing it 3 years ago, but no one was watching it. I'm not even joking. It was to the point where every day I would go back to my videos and check, and at the point, I kid you not, it would be like 0 views for weeks. Like no one would, no, not one person. And then I think the only time I would get a view is because I would actually click on it myself. That was pretty much it. It was that bad, and like it put me in such a distraught where, oh, bro, are people caring about this? But again, with social media today, it's a very complex thing that even the professionals are still working on. Like, I'm still a
Mhm.
student of the game. I'm not saying that after 3 years, I got it figured out, this and that. I'm still changing. I'm kind of going through my own social media content strategy funnel at this point that I'm
Yeah.
looking to kind of build upon. What I learned at that time being like, people may have not been seen on YouTube, but they were hearing about it. And
Yeah.
anytime I met them in person, they were always like, hey, Sean, like, yo, the podcast, you're killing it. And I was like, wait, you're listening? It's like, of course I'm listening. Like, what do you mean? It's like, oh wow, like I didn't even think you were listening to me. I look at my numbers and like no one seems to be there. And I think with social media, it's something that you have to kind of, I will say this, you might have to bend your will a bit to understand it. I wouldn't say try to play the social media game and the algorithm to perfection unless you are a certain type of individual on social media. So if you're like an
Yeah.
influencer, that's probably your game. But if you really want to provide authentic content that's for you, sometimes you may have to fall into that realm of just like the trendy stuff, not to do it, but to understand a little bit better what are some of the tricks and the techniques that other people are doing that are
Yeah.
getting those clicks, that are getting those shares or like saves and everything like that.
Yeah.
So it's important. And I think for a lot of people when it comes to podcasting, the biggest worry again, it's not recording, it's about what are other people going to think? Like, what's the
Yeah.
reaction? Which was the case for me. When I started, I didn't know what people were going to think. I mean, even last year, people barely knew about me. I was still in school, I was still in university. And I guarantee you, with the connections I had, people were definitely not keen to me. I wasn't as known in the community. So, like, when I was going out last year to events, it wasn't because, like, I'm just bored. Like I had intentions because I wanted to get people to know about me. And then they heard and they're like, where have you been all this time? Like I've
Yeah.
never seen you before. It's like I was in school. I was trying to get my education. Then I graduated, thank goodness. Got my business degree and everything like that. And now I'm trying to put in the work to build my network, get those connections. And now I've come to a point where like I go to an event and like everyone literally knows me. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
Sean, how's it going? It's just like, wait, you know him? Like, oh yeah, I met him at this event. Wait, you know Sean? Yeah, I met his event. And like it's like a running gag, like, oh, everyone knows Sean. Like 2 years
Yeah.
ago, no one knew me. Now it's like everyone knows Sean now. Cause like you have to sometimes put in that work. So with
Yeah.
podcasting, it's not just the whole audio aspect. And definitely I'm a person that cares about the audio. Maybe that's why I haven't done videos that much because I'm more of an audio head. Because
Yeah.
that's how it
Yeah.
started originally. With again, it's podcasting because it's like radio and broadcast. So it starts
Yeah.
from there, and I care about it a little bit more. I'm not saying that I won't do video completely. It's something I'm working on. And listen, I'm not perfect. There are some episodes where my computer fan it starts going
Like a jet
crazy.
engine.
And it's like I can't do nothing.
I
As you
know.
can see, like I have no headphones. I have to get some headphones for myself.
Yeah, I'm in the same exact boat in a lot of what you just said, actually. So when it comes to podcasting and social media and all those things, I have like 13 subscribers on YouTube. If you're listening to this, let's change that. Hit subscribe. And it's really funny because when it comes to social media and podcasting, I have to almost brainwash myself. I love what you said about how you were in school and everything like that, and then people are now all of a sudden being like, "Where were you?" I love the feeling of being like a hidden gem where it's like, I'm yet to be discovered. I know what I have to offer is great. Now I just need to sell you on why it's great. That's like a really big thing in terms of imposter syndrome when you're starting out and when you have like 10 subscribers, when you're like figuring this thing out, and if it hasn't grown yet, you're sitting here feeling like an imposter, first of all, but also having to brainwash yourself to keep going, to be like, I've committed to this. How long am I going to keep going before, I have to change these things? And it's also really funny that you say you go places now and that people recognize you. I'm in a similar boat with that too. Actually a major introvert. I don't like leaving my house. Also love my bedroom, but I was doing this event planning job for a while and then I ended up meeting just like a ton of people. Now I go out in public, especially around Toronto, and like I see people I know everywhere and I'll be with like one of my friends or something. They're like, "Oh my God, you actually just know everybody?" I'm like, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's honestly just such a great feeling because being a podcaster, I know this is the right space for me to be in, even if I don't have subscribers, because I love to talk. I love to meet people. I love to tell stories. Podcasters are storytellers. Finding these reasons as to what drew you to this media, to this medium, telling yourself that even if you don't have subscribers, how can you continue because like it feels like it's meant to be sort of thing. Now, I actually have a question for you. You mentioned a little bit earlier that your podcast transitioned from being about COVID and stats and just kind of like figuring out the platforms and everything. And now it's moved into the topic we both know of, the safe room. How did you feel making that transition? Was there a lot of imposter syndrome when you were coming to this conclusion of changing to the safe room, or was it more of like a slow burn evolution? What was that like?
When I first started, like it was called the safe room at the beginning, but
Nice.
again, there was really no like connectivity with my conversation. So like I even think about the episodes I did today. Again, there was COVID. There was I think we did a little bit more of, like the sports conversation. So like my best friend Kevin, we always decided to kind of hop on and like let's talk about this and that. I actually had a second podcast at the time called Court Advantage, which is now kind of translated to the current conversation we have on sports. We call like our Court Advantage specials that are kind of sport focused. That's how it originally started. I was even talking about stuff that was happening to TDSB because I was still fresh out of like high school. So talking about streaming and like how courses like academic versus applied. So I know all high school students are probably getting trauma hearing those two words that I just said right now. But yeah, like streaming at the time it ended. Again, I was bringing people on, but I didn't really have an identity to it.
On a side note, I think this is major for imposter syndrome. When you're not firm in your identity, it's easy to go where the wind takes you with external feedback, and it also becomes a challenge to plan long term. Let's get back to it.
And at the time being when I was going out trying to meet new people and telling them I have a podcast, it was very like dense in terms of my explanation. It's like, oh, what do you do? Have a podcast. What's it called? The safe room. "Oh, what are you talking about?" Basically anything. Like that was my response.
Yeah.
Anything. Like I don't have an actual answer for you. I wish I did, but I think it's when I took my first break, like I mentioned before. I was so busy with school and work. The funny thing about it, which is kind of weird, but it was kind of just the time being me stepping away from my podcast actually made me a little bit more busier in a
Yeah.
hindsight. It's like I somehow started to get more stressed about the little things, just like, oh, I need to take a break. And like, plus, like, it's cold outside, it's Zoom University. So you have no motivation hopping on your class, no matter what time and sitting there for 2 hours. It's like, no, I need to get up, walk away. I can't do this anymore. I think it was through there. I remember just looking at my podcast equipment in my room and I thought, is this the reason why I'm actually more stressed? Like, because I actually stepped away on the one thing that made me feel like safe. I could just be myself. It was kind of like my getaway place away.
Oh, so the
Eventually,
safe room is like your safe room.
yeah, like,
I
yeah.
love that. On a side note, I love that stepping away allowed Sean space to appreciate the value the safe room provides for him in his life. A big thing that can help imposter syndrome is stepping away. Sometimes when I step away, I come back way busier because I was able to network and get interviews. Other times I step away and my progress is smoother because I'm clear on what I need to do after taking time to reflect. Back to the episode.
So I'm like, okay, maybe I need to just come back and like, listen, you can't find this now because unfortunately my account got hacked. But like I was doing like little videos back then. I was kind of like teasers and everything like that. It was kind of expressing just like this dark side of me, just like, oh man, like you're fine, everything's okay. But it's like, no, I'm trying to like tap in back into what I'm doing, which is podcasting. Like I said, you can't find the videos. It might be a blessing because if you go watch it, I can't lie, it's cringe. It's kind of cringe. I mean, but it is what it is.
You know
And
what they say when you cringe at your old self is that's not a bad thing because
I
it's a
mean, yeah,
reflection of your growth.
yeah,
It's a
for sure,
reflection
for
that you've
sure.
changed since then.
Yeah, yeah. So like definitely I think it was from that first break I eventually started to come up with an identity. I'm like, okay, I like talking to people. That's something I've discovered recently during my time. And I want to give people a chance to like really speak about themselves. Because back in high school, one thing I had the pleasure to is that I got to like facilitate lots of workshops. I got to be in different rooms with people and really speak. But also I felt I want to hear what other people are saying as well. Cause like,
Yeah.
sometimes I know I can speak in front of a crowd of people, which is weird. Like I can speak in front of like maybe 500 plus people, I'll be fine. But if I'm speaking in front of my friends, obviously that's like a nightmare because they're just roasting you, like you're a waste, man, you're trash, and everything like that.
That's
But
the same for me, honestly. Like, I've always
ye-
been great at public speaking, but when I'm, like, around people I care about, then I become I don't know if it's
the
maybe
punching bag, just like they're roasting you to
it's
absolute
like a fear of
oblivion.
failure. It's like, I'm worried if I say something, then these guys are gonna, like, tear me a new one. But then when you're speaking to a crowd, it's like, "Yeah, nobody knows me." On a side note, I'll mention, I won't let the people in my life use me as a punching bag. I think that there's a difference between friends as girls and friends as guys, but I will say imposter syndrome goes away for me with public speaking because, first of all, no one knows me, so I automatically don't care. And secondly, I'm literally stepping into a different version of myself for the purpose of the presentation. I already am an imposter, which becomes more like a performance, but when it comes to the vulnerability of performing as me in front of my friends, big yikes. Let's get back to it.
Exactly. But like, I think just from that experience, it allowed me to put the pieces together. So like when I came back at the time, I remember my first interview when I came back, it was two individuals that are part of this nonprofit organization called Rise Edutainment. So basically they work with artists, activists, other business people, you name it. They're located in Scarborough, and I got to speak to the founder and at the time being like the program's coordinator. And the funny thing about this conversation was this was kind of deemed as a big conversation, but it was bigger than I thought because that same founder of that organization went on to be the poet laureate of Ontario. And it still stands today, which was crazy. But I think from that conversation, because he's such a like the two individuals founder, he was such a very intelligent man, like fantastic, and she is someone who's again has a great personality and just such a joy to be around. I think from that conversation, just the way it was structured, and again it was my first episode coming back, hearing it back in when editing and post-production, I'm like, yeah, like I should keep this up, do stuff like that. And I kid you not, Hannah, that rest of 2021, I still stand to today probably my most consistent period. I was just dropping banger after banger, episode after
Love it.
episode like a madman. I was like, bro, I don't know how I did it. Like it was crazy. But yeah, it's I think from that period, it allowed me to reshape the identity of the safe room where it just kind of started random conversations, whatever I'm feeling like. And it was truly really what I was feeling like at that time. Like, okay, what do I want to talk about? I'll talk about this to now like, nah, like I got a whole list of guests on my phone. I'm gonna provide notes now. I'm gonna create outlines. I'm really gonna be more consistent and more serious about what I'm doing.
Yeah. My way about things to help with keeping things aligned with the rest of my show is to have that guest guide package that I sent you because first of all, it manages the expectation of a guest, especially if I haven't met them before, if we're not already friends. We're new friends though, so don't worry about that. If we're not already connected, then you should get to know my style. And then also having the topics outlined. Our topics were very basic. Like, I don't like to plan too much because I feel like over preparation takes away from the organic conversation. But having some type of a guideline to fall back on allows you to continue a flow throughout the show rather than just at one point you're like, oh, I'm kind of tired of talking. We should just end this here. And to me, like, it just really helps the flow. And I had started doing that like after my most recent hiatus. So you even mentioned earlier on in this episode that after taking a hiatus is when you really started to evolve your show. That's when more direct topics started to come up. I've noticed the same for myself that after taking some space away, it starts to clear the mind to be like, what is it that I'm missing? What does this feel like?
Right.
Does this feel right to me? And how can I change it if it doesn't? Something that we were talking about earlier too is when people just give up after the first 20 episodes. Sometimes I wonder if like people are giving up because it's too hard or something, or is it because they haven't found the exact thing that they want to say yet? I love that you didn't give up, but there's a reality out there where maybe after you didn't see motion after like the COVID statistics and stuff like that, there's a reality where you could have just put it down and not done it anymore.
Right.
But now you've evolved it to change and grow with you and to be able to connect with people that need this thing. It's really, really great that you pushed through it and that you didn't let imposter syndrome get the best of you.
Yeah.
And now you have this space where you can host other people and you can meet people and funnel everybody that you meet and be able to give them a stage. And
Mhm.
I really love that.
Yeah, and like just to put a little added nugget. So you mentioned again, a lot of people don't make it past 20 episodes. At the time I took my first break, I had 20 episodes exact. So again, that was a breaking point where if I didn't fall out of that slump, it probably would have been the end of the safer. We probably would not be here today. So again, it's crazy how things work in a way where when you take a break, I don't look at that as a bad thing. It's like you mentioned, the best way to know if you're improving on your work is when you actually stop doing it and you take
Yeah.
the time to reflect. And it's happened to me a couple of times because sometimes when you're in it, you're in it. And sure, there are lots of people who are able to like manage their like stuff, micromanage everything while doing the work. But maybe sometimes you need to tell yourself, okay, I'm not gonna upload anything, or like I'm gonna take some time off. And that was during my second hiatus. So early in the year, I was like coming into 2023 with 90 episodes. And I said, I'm about to do like a 10 episode stretch. I'm going to promote it, kind of build it up and everything like that. Everything was well. And somehow, episode 99, it's when everything just paused. Because all of a sudden, it's just, I had the recording done for episode 100. For some reason, I didn't get to it. And you know, the funniest thing about it, and it just shows the growth of like, you know, the imposter syndrome I was having. I was a perfectionist. So to kind of break it down a bit, I was someone that's like, I wanted to make sure everything was good, everything was it needed to be the way it was, but it was kind of clouding my just my patience a bit because I'm persistent. If I want something, I'm gonna do whatever it takes. I am persistent.
Yeah.
I'll say it straight up. I think at that point it was something I need to really reevaluate at the time. And as I grew and I didn't release an episode in like a weekly basis, I would go into a panic attack. It was like, nope, this is not right. This is not right. Hannah, I'm telling you right now, after my second hiatus or during my second hiatus, I was not even worried. At one point, I totally forgot, like, oh, did I record episode 100? Oh, I did. Okay. Okay, cool. Because I learned that it's not about trying to get perfection, but more progression.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
through that, it allowed me to take those 3 months off, and it was 3 months.
Something that is coming to my mind from this conversation. With this show, we like to talk about self-sabotage. Imposter syndrome is definitely a self-sabotage mechanism. What I like to do with this show is to find something positive within these self-sabotage mechanisms. With imposter syndrome, it's kind of making me think that, let's say you have a podcast, you've started, you're at 20 episodes, and you're like, I hate this now. And you feel like an imposter. You feel like nobody's listening to this, nobody wants to hear me, etc. Sometimes these feelings of I'm an imposter, I hate to say it, but sometimes they can be right. Sometimes it's saying this does not suit you. You need to step away, reflect, and come back and see how you can evolve it so that it does suit you. I feel like where people get caught up is when they feel this imposter syndrome, they feel like I should give up. When that is not the case, you don't have to give up, but it might be your body's way of telling you to make some type of evolution. How can I change this, not completely get rid of it?
Right, exactly. And like you mentioned, I feel like with podcasting, sometimes if you feel it's not the right avenue for you, then it's okay to tell yourself that maybe this is not for me. I think with podcasting, what it allows, it's a platform where you're able to kind of find yourself and tap in what you
Yeah.
want to do. Because listen, I'm not gonna come down somebody's throat and say, "Oh, you didn't make it past 20," or like you should continue this and that. I have a lots of people who done podcasting for like probably less than 20, less than 10 episodes. And it
Mhm.
was just for them to find something inside of them like, oh, okay, I don't want to do this, but I kind of want to try this out. And
Yeah,
I think my
just to see
best
if
thing,
you can.
yeah, like my best thing to do is just support them in that because the podcast community and people don't get to know, like, we're a very loving community. Like,
Oh, for
it's
sure.
not very cutthroat as a lot of people think. Yes, I will say this: there are lots of people doing it. And I feel like I wish they understand the work that goes into it, but it's really something where we're open to anyone. Now, I think the goal for a lot of people in Canada is that we want to get the podcast community as high as like the United States, because like the United States, it's like it's crazy, it's booming
It's
over
booming,
there.
yeah.
It's completely booming. Canada's still now kind of getting into their own bag, and we're hoping to kind of build it up together. But yeah, like if podcast is not for you, then it's totally fine. But if it's something that you actually want to start doing, I think as a podcaster, I'm not even gonna say I'm a seasoned veteran. I'm 3 years in. I'm still growing. Like I'm barely past like the I'm just getting past like the rookie stage. I'm now in like okay, the novice, everything like that. But I try my best to help people with their journeys when it comes to podcasting. So whether it's making it easier, giving them a space to like, hey, listen, do you want to come on my podcast? Like we can talk. Maybe you can pick up some things if you need like any advice or feedback, then I'm here for you.
Yeah, I really love that. I would love to switch gears a little bit to talk about entrepreneurship. And you mentioned you would love some space to talk about your venture. This is that space. What entrepreneurial projects are you working on at the moment?
Yeah, there's a lot of projects that I'm working on currently. And to even add on, Hannah, with entrepreneurship, it's something that again, it's as hard as podcasts, if not
If
10
not
times
harder.
harder.
Entrepreneurship is definitely harder than podcasting. Just saying.
For me, I mentioned before that I'm working on a little program that's going to teach people how to start a podcast. I know what a lot of people, a lot of the questions they ask are, what's the equipment I need to get? How am I going to structure my episodes? What about podcast distribution? How am I going to get my episodes out there? How am I going to have a marketing strategy? Because again, it's more than just speaking. You have to figure out how you're going to promote your podcast effectively. So it's an 8-week program that I'm working on, and people can sit down with me and it's one on one. I don't want it to be where it's just completely no communication. And definitely, I have different ways to give out this program, whether it's something like an ebook or like a course. But for now, it's Zoom or like Riverside, the platform I use. I want to actually inject them into that podcasting space. So, like the space I use to record, which is Riverside. I know you use StreamYard. There's so much different outlets that
Mhm.
you can use.
Yeah, honestly,
So
I use StreamYard because it's free, and that's why we have that little duck logo, and it's gonna stay there because I don't feel like paying for something unless my podcast is actually making money.
yeah, and listen, I will say this: that's a whole nother conversation for another day. Podcast compensation, because there's different ways to like get that. But yeah, that's kind of like my 8-week program that I'm working on right now.
I
I'm
love
also looking to like implement services of like audio engineering. So if there's people who need help with editing audio tracks, That's something I want to do. So I want to create like different packages. So like for 5 episodes, like this is gonna be the charge fee for 10 episodes. And then I want to have like a premium and a standard rate. So if it's a standard, these are going to be like some of the features. I'll take out like some like the uhs or like the ums and stuff like that. If you want premium, I'll go like really into detail, maybe to fix like the audio quality if there's background noise, like
Yeah, I edit my
EQ.
own podcast on, like, the standard level. I'm, like, always taking out the filler words, the breaths, and everything like that, and I'll do, like, the little, like, auto background noise remover, but I don't have a de-esser, or I don't worry about the, like, the exaggerated P sounds, the pops, or anything like
Yeah,
that.
so
I just
I
do
guess
what I can by cutting, and then that's it. That's where I leave it,
yeah. So
but
like yeah,
we're gonna have
I
to
feel
keep in
you.
touch because I feel like there's lots that I can learn from you in this whole respect.
Definitely, again, when it comes to podcast equipment, you definitely have to be very budget friendly at the beginning. So, like, even to mention Hannah, my first mic, it was literally 20 bucks. And I
Yeah,
got it from Winners of
yeah.
all places. It wasn't like a Long and McQuaid or something like that. It was Winners
It
because
was
at the
winners,
time
like,
I
they
just needed
don't
something.
specialize in audio
Exactly. And then like this
technology.
little mic here, like this came with a like a two package deal. So it was like $100. So I think separate this might be like 40 or something like this. This cost me close to like 250, maybe more.
Oh, wow. Mine's somewhere in the middle. I use this guy,
Oh,
Snowball.
is that a blue microphone?
Yeah, it's blue Snowball, and
Oh,
it's
yes.
honestly, like, I think it was maybe around 50 bucks, and, like, it's not top of the line, it doesn't have the, like, padded, like, buffer, I don't know all the words,
Oh,
but
like the windscreen and everything like
it
that?
doesn't have anything like that, but honestly, it does the trick, and in my opinion, it was relatively inexpensive, and I can tell that it does its job because when I'm not using it, it definitely makes a difference.
Yeah.
Eventually, I might invest in a better one, but at the moment, it does everything that I need it to. So, when
And
you're
that's fine.
starting, like, exactly, do what you
That
need to do and what feels right for you. A $20 mic? Start a podcast. No mic at all? Start a podcast. You can use your Apple headphones even if you don't have the budget to buy something $20, use something that you already have.
Yeah, like, for sure, like, you sometimes you gotta be budget friendly, and that's totally fine. So, like, I'm clearly working with someone right now who's looking to build a podcast, and, like, she's kinda worried, like, "Oh, I don't have, like, the mic that you have and this and that." And it's just like, that's totally fine because, again, one thing I always ask them, it's like, "What's your budget? Like, what are you willing to spend on?"
Yeah.
And usually they'll say, like, probably around, like, 200, 300, which is fine. So, like, if you can't get an interface like mine, that's okay. Like I literally got an interface last year. It took me 2.5 years to get an interface. So sometimes you have to go through those stomping grounds before you get to like the equipment that you're designing. Even today, I'm still telling myself I want to upgrade my equipment. So I want to get a new interface. I want to have like other microphones because I want to test it out. I don't want to just be like I'm using this microphone, like, oh, it's perfect. I might want to try out like a Rode Pod mic because I know
Yeah.
lots of people have those. Maybe I want to try like a Shure SM58. I want to try all those microphones and see what's out.
Just to get us
Yes,
back on
yes.
track, in terms of entrepreneurship, imposter syndrome, all of the things, what would be your biggest win at the moment? And also, what would be a loss that you feel in terms of imposter syndrome? Have you had opportunities where you were like, this seems like a great opportunity, but I don't know if I could do this opportunity? Just all the things.
Okay, I actually love this question. So I'll list out a couple. When just a couple weeks back was Fan Expo. And if you don't know about Fan Expo, then it's one of the biggest events of the year. It was at the Metro Toronto Convention Center.
It's like Comic Con, but Canadian.
To be safe, I've never been to a fan expo, never, and that was never really my intention. But the Canadian Podcast Awards was going to have a table set up, and they were looking to invite podcasters who wanted to come out there, kind of promote their podcast and everything like that. I saw their application, I signed up, and first thing off the jump, I was never in the mindset like, oh, I'm going to get selected. I just kind of signed up because okay, let's just see what happens, just whatever. I wasn't being like negative, but I also wasn't saying I'm gonna get it. It was just kind of like let's just throw it out there, see,
I love that though, because that's neutral. Like,
yeah,
neutrality is really the best way to avoid hurt from expectations, where you're like,
exactly,
"I'm gonna
exactly,
get this," then you don't, you're, like, destroyed. But carry on.
exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah. So then I filled out my application. Like about a week and a half later, I get this email saying like, we just confirmed your spot at Fan Expo, and I was like, What? Like, that's crazy. I'm gonna be at FanExpo sharing my podcast. So, like, knowing me, I had to like come prepared. So, like, I brought my laptop, all my equipment. I have like these little mini microphones. So, like the clip-on mics that you put on for like interviews. That's something I also do as well. And I brought all my stuff there.
I
And
love it.
I got all my stuff set up and I started to like just promote. The one thing I did not have are business cards. So I didn't have nothing like that. So that's the reason why I had
All of
to
my work
improvise.
is online, so I feel so weird having business cards. People are always like, "Do you have a business card?" I'm like, "Are you 70?" Because all of my work is online, and I know, like, people are gonna get mad at that, where it's like, it doesn't mean that, like, a paper version doesn't help, but every time I have a business card, I lose it before I use it.
Listen, I will say this, business cards are definitely important. I'm more on the new school side of like digital business cards or like the QR codes. I
Yeah.
have that, so I feel like it's easier. I mean, lots of people are still saying, I know I want a physical copy. It's just like you can literally scan my QR code, you get everything you need. I don't understand. No, like again, I didn't have no business cards or posters, so that's why I had to bring my equipment. I was really improvising. It actually made me stood out way more because I did a couple interviews and I'm actually working on the content right now. So you might start seeing that very soon on my social media. But everyone was kind of blown away, and like there was a podcast beside me, and they're like, yo, you look like you're about to do a whole show here. Like, what's going on? We brought our stuff here. Like, we had they had like a little wheel that you could spin and get a prize. But like, I was literally with my light box, which I have set up right now, with my computer, with my mics ready, literally like pulling people in, like, hey, you want to be called for an interview? It's like, yeah, sure. So like that was literally my approach. I'm like, listen, let me just grab people, start
Was it like
talking to
little
them.
hot seats?
It was kinda like little hot seat, which is funny because like, one of the main segments on our show is called the hot seat. So
Yeah,
it's kinda like,
I know. I researched my guest.
yeah, I'll just pull people, just see, like, what's there. But that was one of my huge wins. Like, other ones include me getting to, like, cover different, like, community events. So at the beginning of the year, I got to go to this entrepreneurial event called Secure the Bag, and I got to do interviews there with some of the guest speakers, with some of the panelists. It was such a fantastic time. And even I mentioned Rise Edutainment before. I went to their showcase and I did the pre-show, and it was absolutely amazing. Got to see some of the performances, and I had like photographers with me that I got in contact with. Said, "Hey, like I need a photographer. I need someone to help me take photos, help me do the videos and everything like that." And it was amazing. So like those are kind of like my three main wins. There's more, but those are some of the few things. I wish I kind of like wrote everything down, but there's a lot. The losses, I know you mentioned that, so I'm getting into that right now. The one loss that I would probably say that really connects to my imposter syndrome. So there was a project I wanted to do, sort of like a workshop series. And I mentioned before my service that I'm working on, which is how to teach people how to start a podcast. It was something similar like that, where I wanted to kind of give like tips or tools of podcasting by bringing other podcasters that I connected with, really make it feel like the podcasters were the facilitators and creating that space to, share knowledge mobilization. I was all about that at the time. So I decided to apply for a grant because obviously with these projects, you need money. You
Oh,
can't do it for
yeah.
free. I saw this one grant. And I thought, okay, cool. It's from the Ontario Arts Council. This kind of fits and aligns with what I'm doing. Cool. Now, mind you, I think the deadline for this was like late October. I wanted to start this event that I had in like mid-November. So keep that in mind. I end up submitting it literally the day of because lazy procrastination kills you sometimes, but I submitted it nonetheless. And I contact everyone ahead saying like, okay, I'm creating this grant, I'm this application, excuse me, and I'm ready. Like, let's go, 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 go. Next thing I know, I go to a grant writing workshop a couple days later, and it was really good. It was a couple people I already knew ahead who have like their own like collective or grassroots groups, and they were sharing like, okay, guys, so one thing you need to know about grant writing, all that stuff, there are certain projects that you have to prepare ahead of time, and make sure that your project dates are not close to the deadlines of the grant, because sometimes what will happen if you submit around that time, the committee, they will not fund your project retroactively because obviously it's a short period of time. When they said that, Hannah, my heart sunk because in that moment I realized I can't do the project because I did the exact same thing that they said you shouldn't do, which is submit a grant and then my project's like 2 weeks later. Because it's like, if you're the committee, we can't like review a grant in 2 weeks. It takes months,
Yeah.
usually months. So in that moment, I'm like, bro, this is actually crazy. So I had to go back and contact everyone that I already got in contact with. It's like, listen, like, we can't get the money. In that moment, it allowed me a little bit to like just be more prepared
Yeah.
and understand that again, not everything needs to be rush, 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 rush. Like again,
Yeah.
this goes back to the whole perfection because I had an idea like, oh, I want to do this, this, and that. But it's like sometimes things happen for a certain reason. There's a time and place for everything. That's kind of like a saying I have for myself. So even though I may not get to a certain goal now, it doesn't mean that it can't be achievable. It's just
Yeah, of
probably
course.
I need to find the right time to get towards it and eventually it will come into play. So like even recently, I've been still having the ideas to run like different projects I want to do. I'm now more particular in terms of I'm not trying to do an event like off the jump. Like
Yeah.
if it's something that takes 6 months, fine. If it takes a year, okay, like we can work our way towards it. And
Yeah.
I think just from that, my imposter syndrome is kind of it's shriveled up a bit where I'm not so focused about the perfections of like, but rather how am I growing every single day? If I got to edit my podcast for like 10 minutes, cool. If I got to work on a piece of social media content, that's fine. If I got the chance to go to a fan expo and do interviews and stuff like that, that's amazing. I'm not so
Yeah.
worried about the outcome, but more what happens in between now.
Yeah, and what you were saying about applying for this grant and how it now you're moving forward wanting to be more prepared, to me, it actually doesn't sound necessarily like preparedness is the problem. You seem like a very prepared guy. You're prepared when you have the time. So it's not necessarily the preparedness that was the problem, it was the procrastination. Because I find that there's actually somebody that I met once at an event, she told me this. There is two types of procrastination. There's procrastinating things that will actually hold you back later, like getting ready for your day. If you didn't pack your lunch in time, then you're going to have a crappy day because you weren't prepared. But then there's also situations where you're procrastinating a certain project where it's like maybe it has a very specific deadline and you leave it up until almost the end. And like sometimes rushing to get it done has the ability to like light a fire under your ass and you can like get things done,
Yeah.
twice as fast as if you were like more prepared. But I feel like the situation where you're applying for a grant, you wanna give yourself extra time because you don't know what their process is like and because you don't know all of the requirements that they necessarily have. So moving forward with, like, projects and stuff like that, making sure when there's other people who are in charge of the schedule that you have so much buffer room to be able to accommodate whatever needs to happen.
Yeah, there's a lot. Like you mentioned, grant review teams, they take months. So like
They take months. Podcasters, I'm sure, sometimes take some time to get together as well. Like, all of the moving
yeah.
pieces take time, and procrastinating is the best way to, like, really throw a wrench in that type of a project because all the moving parts require promptness when they eventually are ready, right? To wrap up our conversation with our final topic here, in terms of your big dreams, what advice would you give younger you in terms of imposter syndrome?
If I like to paint a picture, so my younger self again, I was shy, which kind of comes to surprise a lot of people. Like, you were shy? It's like, yeah, like
Yeah.
I know I'm kind of like an extrovert now where I'll literally talk to anyone. There's probably the chance if I talk to someone right now, I'll probably get their contact in like 5 minutes. Like
Yeah.
that's how like active I am. But I was very shy. Again, I was not open to like talking with that much people. I had my friends, but other than that, like I wasn't really trying to be the social butterfly like I am in today. And I think it was not the matter that I was shy, but again, I was so afraid in terms of just expressing my personality and just expressing my goofy side. And like I had some blimps during my middle school days and everything like that. Even like high school, I think that allowed me to really grow into the person I am today. So I know you mentioned my younger self, so I'm gonna try to break it down to like separate periods. So I'll start with my high school self because even though I'm 22, I'm about to be 23 next month. In high school, it's such a huge gap still in terms of like how I am now to how I was in high school. So I would probably say don't be so anxious about getting everything's done. Don't be so anxious about getting everything done because that is gonna start poisoning your mind and rather you're not gonna feel in the right state.
How many teenagers feel like they're, like, 16, but they're behind in life? I'm like, "Bro, you've got literally how many more repetitions of 16 years old before
Yeah, like
you're
and like
old?"
I and like it's very common too. Like when you're in your 20s, that is your growing period. You're supposed to fail and go through all these stuff. Like again, I'm 22. I'm just starting. I'm not even at the halfway point. So like I know there's about to be more stuff that's gonna hit me in the face. That's gonna be so brutal. But yeah, my high school self, I would just say like take your time and don't be so anxious. For my middle school self, I would probably say be more open. Be more open. Like take chances on yourself to be a little bit more goofy, be a little bit more out of the box. Cause listen, for anyone who knows me back in middle school, I literally did work and went home. I would not stick around. I wouldn't really do much. The only time I would stick around after school is if I was like on a sports team or something like that. Even in the classroom, I did not try to talk to people. I again had my friends, but I was very reserved. And again, there were times where I decided to be open and like people were so shocked. It's like, what? Like Sean's doing this? That's crazy. And then like when people ask about like, what do you think about Sean? It's like, I mean, he's smart. That was really the answer. Like he's
Yeah.
smart. He's really smart. But like that's it. They don't think like, oh, he could probably talk a room up today and like for hours and hours. It's like so I would tell my middle school self, like, just be open. And my elementary self, like my young self, keep dreaming. Just keep
Yeah.
being creative because when I was young, which is funny, and I'll tell people this, I don't tell people a lot of people about this, but I kind of had like, little anger management problems. I was like, I
Oh,
got
me too. Like,
angry.
some people, they deal with the big sad. I deal with the big angry. And
Yeah, so, like,
yes.
I was just there was again, I was just hard in terms of just, like, really express myself, so anything that just got me under my skin, I would get angry so quickly, and, I was, like, put in, like, special classes because they thought, like, "Oh, like, this is something I have to control." I think because I didn't really have that patience, which again, like, you're young, which is I don't blame myself, and I think I would tell myself, "Just, like, keep dreaming, keep
Yeah.
thinking big because yes, at some point you're gonna have to be able to tell yourself, okay, I need to control myself. But
Yeah.
just because I'm
Well,
controlling myself doesn't mean I have to like lock in all my creativity.
yeah, there's balance to everything. Like, that's such an interesting thing to say. It's actually, I think, Joe Rogan who says, like, it's better to be a monster and have to learn how to control it than to be more sheepish and then have to learn how to come out of your shell. To me, that anger, especially as a young child, that's your passion. That's your creativity. That's like the person inside you that sees some type of reality that's different than how everyone else sees it and wants everybody else to see it. You gotta like use that anger to like, oh, get it through their heads, right? I really love everything that you just said. I think that the fact that you separated it into phases of life is just so special because it's funny. I relate to every phase that you just mentioned. Being in high school and, being a little bit less outgoing and being more shy and everything. I was the same way. People described me as nice, smart, and quiet. And now, like, I'm a chatterbox. I don't shut up. And then, like, with elementary school and the earlier years, again, same thing. Like, I was very creative. I was a dreamer. I loved being out with nature more than I loved being with people. I really didn't have a lot of friends throughout school. And that's because I always lived in my head. I was always dreaming. I was always creating these realities for myself that were not the same as what everybody else creates. You can feel isolated by that when you're a kid. You can feel like I'm different. I'm weird. I don't do things the same way as everyone else. But then you get older, and these things that made you other as a kid are your superpowers now. And they can be real positive attributes to multiple facets of life. When as a kid, you just feel so alienated and you feel like this is just me who feels this way. When
Yeah.
it's absolutely not true. We all feel these ways at least one point or another in time. I love that you say that you're 22 and you're figuring these things out, that your 20s are for mistakes and life hits you. Life gave me a real punch in the face when I was 22. And then for the past 4 years, I'm 26. I've been evolving my entire belief system because of this major life moment that I had when I was 22. Sometimes people, it's more of a trickle effect. Sometimes they move through life and they don't necessarily have this punch in the face moment like I did. There's moments where like people can wake up in their 50s, let's say, and they realize like their life has followed this trajectory and then they come to these realizations. They're like, oh my God, what did I do with my life? That's a completely different journey than I've gone through.
That's
But
the
I really
midlife
love
crisis right there.
what's that?
That's the midlife crisis right there.
It
You
is,
know,
it's funny, I felt like I had my midlife crisis at 22, and I'm sure I'm probably gonna have another midlife crisis at 50, but life doesn't necessarily need to be these midlife crises, if we're taking time to reflect, if we are learning from ourselves, if we are actually speaking to our hearts and like not just living in our head and not just like acting rather than reflecting, you develop this wisdom and you seem like a very wise person. You seem like you have a lot of ambition and a lot of connection with people. And I really, really admire that. And I think that you're in exactly the right space for the type of person that you are. Thank you so much for everything that you do. I will definitely keep listening to the Safe Room, so definitely keep doing it.
I really appreciate it, Hannah. Thank you so much for having me on your show, on your podcast. It's
My pleasure.
again, most of the time, it's me doing the questions. I don't get interviewed that much. So like that's something I'm even trying to do. I've been seeing lots of people creating their own shows, and I'm telling myself, listen, you've done enough sitting in the seat asking the question. It's time they ask the questions to you, Shon. So I saw the opportunity, hopped on it, and I'm really glad I did. So again, thank you so much for having me. And thanks to everyone listening. Hope you appreciate everything I had to say. Again, this is an open space. So we're always about just sharing our
Yeah.
personal stories, being our authentic selves. And again, if you want to check out the podcast, The Safe Room, it's on
Oh, thank you.
Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can follow us, The Safe Room Official, on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm currently kind of revamping, but if you do want to check out the YouTube channel, The Safe Room Podcast, we actually have a couple of videos up that's basically reviewing some of the events I've gone to this year, two specifically that I mentioned in this interview already. And the website as well is working on. So there's a lot. There's a lot.
Now, is there anything else that you would like to add in regards to imposter syndrome, podcasting, entrepreneurship, any of the topics we've touched on today?
Yeah, so a couple things. So imposter syndrome, don't look at it as a curse, but matter just something that you're learning from. Don't look at it as something that it's a detriment to what you do, but rather it's like your learning tool. You're understanding like this is what I'm going through. How can I improve myself and how can I be able to just grow myself out of that, pain, and I'm able to really flourish into my true and authentic self. So I'll say that for imposter syndrome. For podcast and entrepreneurship specifically, you have to get used to the word no. You have to. Like if you are someone that cannot take no or denial, then you're gonna have a hard time with entrepreneurship. If I tell you the amount of no's I've got, if I had like maybe $1 for the no's I've got, I'd probably
I'd be
double my
rich.
bank account. I would say rich. I'd probably double my bank account because like that's how much no's I've got. But the no's are not something that you look as a liability, but rather again, it's showing you that you're trying and you're always going out there and asking. Because it's worse to just be like you get that one no and you stop. But if you keep going, and regardless if it's no's, eventually you keep pushing and pushing. Eventually, once you get that one yes, it completely subsets all the no's that you got in the past. So you have to get used to the word no for entrepreneurship and for podcasting. If you have a voice, share it.
Yeah.
Again, this has come from
Boom.
someone who,
Mic
like, I
drop.
was young. Yeah, no, like, this is someone who's young that had a hard time sharing his voice. And again, I know I talk about the safe for being a safe space for everyone, but it's kind of been my own personal evolving ground where I've never been more happy than I ever did. Like literally, I wake up every day. Like I think about the podcast. Like it's like, oh, I'm so happy that I have something like this. I kid you not, going to university and even midway through university, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I had zero clue. And literally the podcasting, honestly, it kind of saved me in a way where I kind of know exactly what I want to do. Now I'm an entrepreneur. I'm doing this and I'm looking to just grow my own potential. Obviously, the next step is income. That's coming on the way. Making income, that's definitely on the way. But yeah, if you have a podcast or you want to start into podcasting, use your voice.
Yeah. I really love that. I really hope that anybody listening had a chance to learn something from Shon. Please reach out to him on social media. Reach out to me. I love feedback. Anything that really resonated with you, or even if you did not agree with something that we mentioned, I would just really love to know. And as you say, with getting no a lot, you cannot be sensitive to rejection in business. That's just the way it is. A lot of the times you will hear no, 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 no. And then these are learning experiences. I feel like there's balance in hearing no, because either you need to see why they said no and you can make adjustments to your package so that the next person says yes, or you stand your friggin' ground and you don't make changes until you find that customer who suits you best. There's balance, because sometimes changes are necessary and other times they just weren't your customer, and that's totally okay. The next one will come, and as you said, it really supersedes all of the no's that you get when you get that one big good client. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for being here. Thank you, listeners, for chiming in as well. And yeah, that wraps up our episode for today. Thank you so much for being here with me. And if you enjoyed today's topic, now is a great moment to subscribe. If you have any feedback about today's topic, please reach out to my social channels. I help creative entrepreneurs market their creations in a way that feels authentic. I have a self-study marketing program that covers basic and advanced marketing concepts with 9 modules and activity sheets. I also sell content creation templates to help you manage your social media with unlimited content creation ideas. And I also offer one-on-one marketing consulting services. Check out my socials and my website to learn more. If you're interested in working with me, please reach out via email. So that's social media if you're reaching out for my podcast, and email if you're reaching out for business. All relevant contact links are in the description, and thanks again for listening. Cheers for now. That was pretty good.